The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we are webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. So thrilled to be here with you on this wonderful Wednesday morning. You know I love Wednesdays because we have a lot of exciting stuff that happens on Wednesdays. I want to remind all of you that we're going to be starting Ask Dr. Doreen in just a moment, but this entire show is meant to be interactive. We love your input, your questions, your comments, your suggestions. And Emily is showing you lots of different ways that you can be interacting with us right now. If you're watching us live, there is only one place right now that you can watch us live. It's on www.autism-live.com. If you look at that desktop that's there, it's a virtual desktop, there is a box that it says questions we're answering right now. Put your cursor there. You can type in whatever you want, hit enter, and it will show up magically here on my screen. I can be asking Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh your questions. What a wonderful opportunity. It's totally free. You don't have to log in. Nobody's asking for your credit card or any other information from you, but a great opportunity to be asking questions of a true visionary in the field of autism. So without further ado, it is time for Ask Dr. Doreen.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism, and now you get to ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen, and again, we want to welcome Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. I love this hour because it's a great opportunity. I learned so much when you're here, and I know our viewers, you guys have written in and said how helpful this is to you as well, and so I encourage all of you to be participating right now. Our lines are open, and the live feature on the website is open so that you can be asking questions. Because we have you here this morning, we have some timely breaking news, something that I wanted to talk with you briefly as we get to the questions. We already have people writing in questions, so we won't belabor it. But there's a new study that is coming out yesterday and today in the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry, talking about autism and the potential for children to lose a diagnosis over time. And I will say that we're going to be taking this research and talking about it in depth with Dr. Jonathan Tarbox on Friday, exactly how they did the study and what it means and how we can interpret that. But already the news media is jumping on the bandwagon and reporting about this study. And I'm a little offended at the way that already people are describing this. Mm-hmm. Yesterday in the Daily Mail, the headline was, "Children can grow out of autism."
Right.
And I just want to get your opinion because you really are someone in this field who over 2 decades has been there at the forefront working with these children and seeing what recovery looks like. And I want to hear from you about the word recovery, about losing a diagnosis, and this notion of growing out, which, by the way, the study does not say anything about growing out of autism.
Right, right. Well, thank you. First of all, it's over 3 decades, believe it or not.
I don't believe it. You do not look old enough to have been doing it for that long.
Yes.
I wouldn't be telling people that.
Yeah,
They won't believe you.
But no, there's, you know, we've always said, and it's been controversial, I guess, for many different reasons over different years. We've always said that some of our kids recover. Yeah. There's no question about that for me. Because not only do I have kids that I treated when they were 2, 3, 4, 5, so on, who are now teenagers, or in their 20s and doing extremely well and are recovered, and functioning well in society. But I've also learned several things over the years. So, first of all, to address this, I'm really glad they did this study, first of all, because they contrasted individuals who were considered optimal outcome or recovered with individuals who have high functioning autism, I guess, and with typically developing individuals. And they really did see that these people were doing great in terms of language, the experimental group, or the group that they were really looking at. They were doing great socially and so on and so forth. So it makes headway in terms of the general society understanding that it is possible to overcome autism. But for the media to, I guess, if they have presented it in terms of you grow out of autism, I don't really believe that. I don't think I've ever seen that you would just simply grow out of it. You do, and actually in this study even, they're now going to the phase of analyzing in detail the interventions and treatments that these optimal outcome individuals received, so that they can see what was the most effective. And they are concluding that early intervention is critical. So it would be sad if parents believed that just by waiting the child would grow out of it. It's like any other thing. The longer you wait, the more pervasive it becomes. And if you don't even really worry about how serious or how scary the diagnosis of autism is, and you simply think about the fact, if you just cut it up into symptoms, is how I look at it, and you think, okay, this is a child who has, typically a lot of our kids have some sort of biology that needs to be stabilized. And if you ignore that, that's definitely not going to get them better without any intervention. And if you ignore symptoms like language or social behavior or anything else, those are also not going to get better. In fact, they're going to get worse, because the reason that a lot of our kids develop challenging behaviors, I guess, is simply because they can't communicate, because they don't fit in, because they can't read social norms and rules and so on. And so they will develop more and more aggressive behaviors, challenging behaviors over time. So, and then puberty, of course, makes it even worse. But there are certain, you can't just let things be. On the other hand, the positive thing is that people are beginning to understand that with the right interventions at the right age and intensity and quality, the kids are able to overcome the diagnosis of autism. And again, I'm interested. I haven't read the details of the study yet, since it just came out, but it's one thing to say that you no longer fit the diagnostic criteria for autism. So a lot of our kids, they go through the process of intervention, and they will go from the diagnostic criteria of autism to, let's say, PDD. So that means they have fewer symptoms than would qualify them for autism, but they still have issues. Or the child might drop the diagnosis of autism and go to Asperger's diagnosis or any other diagnosis. But the whole concept of a diagnosis is that the problems that are present are prevalent enough to make it difficult or impossible for the individual to function adaptively in society. So when you diagnose an adult, you're looking at, is the individual functioning well at work, at home with their spouse, etc. And when you're looking at children, are they able to function in school? Are they able to have friends, communicate with others, and so on? So if it's pervasive enough, I guess, if the symptoms are strong enough where the child is falling behind in any way, then it's a disorder. There's a problem, and you can treat it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I so appreciate your comments on this, because I do think we're going to be hearing a lot about this in the next couple of days. It's going to be in the news, and it did concern me as soon as I saw that grow out. If you read the rest of the article that the Daily Mail wrote, there are several other quotes in it where they are very clear about the fact that all of these children had treatment on board.
Absolutely.
And in some cases very intensively. And as you said, they're going to look at, how much and where. So I just really took issue with that headline, grow out. Don't want to send that message out to parents because there is work to be done.
Right.
For some of our kids, there is this optimal outcome, but it's a great deal of work and there's no guarantee, and it is not all children.
Absolutely. I mean, I will say, though, that all children benefit from behavioral intervention and from, obviously, from, helping stabilize any medical conditions, dietary, those types of things. Everyone benefits. But the amount of the benefits and how fast you can get the child to overcome some of the problem areas really depends on so many different factors. Sure. So some of the children do incredibly well. I mean, several of them. A lot of our kids are
There's one
college.
in my house who's doing very well.
There you go.
He's not yet recovered, but he is doing very well.
Right, right.
So,
and I think when you get to that point where, you really are learning from your environment, then you most likely will catch up from peers and from school and so on and so forth. But a lot of our kids are not even able to really attend to their environment yet and to learn appropriately. So intervention is the key to it.
Yes, progress is available for all of our kids. And some of what you're saying dovetails into the first question that we're going to ask, because you were talking about the whole child, taking care of the whole child, and how sometimes there's some other issues. Someone wrote it in and said, "Dear Dr. Doreen, if a child undergoes alternative treatments that evoke strong reactions such as yeast treatment or sequential homeopathy, when also undergoing ABA, how do your therapists handle the reactions? Do they prepare behavioral intervention plans? What is your opinion about undergoing such a treatments when also undergoing ABA? Please let us know. Thank you." I love this question because sometimes...
Very real.
Yes, it is. It's very real. And sometimes if you're doing something to take care of a medical problem, you'll see that there's a little bit of a reaction.
Things get worse behaviorally. That's right.
Yeah,
That's
and is that an opportunity to stop the ABA, or are the therapists trained to deal with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think you have to. Well, I mean, our therapists are definitely trained to deal with that. You have to. And that is, it's a very good question because so many parents will avoid doing these interventions together. For us, it's important to try to get the child stable as fast as you can from a biochemical perspective. And yes, yeast, for instance, if you're on an antifungal medication, sometimes the kids will have yeast die off and they will have reactions to it, which makes them just sort of more, if you take, I mean, I don't know if, I try a lot of the different medications that our kids are given because I sort of want to know what the actual feeling is and the side effects. And antifungals can make you kind of, dizzy, somewhat out of it, spaced out, difficult to concentrate, all this sort of stuff, although it gets less and less over time. It doesn't last that long either, the die-off. But it's very important for the behavioral team to really understand those types of side effects and reactions and simply reduce demands and increase reinforcers. It's really that simple. And when you start a program, any program, and you're teaching it behaviorally, you start with a massive amount of reinforcement and very low demand. And then over time, you gradually reverse those. You increase your demand and reduce the reinforcers so that the child or individual is able to kind of generalize. It's the same exact thing here. If you think about it in any other way, like if you have to go to work and you're sick, the day that you go to work and you're sick, you simply don't do the harder tasks that are on your plate. You do the easier tasks, you maybe take a shorter day, more breaks, those types, and you're doing the same exact thing. You increase reinforcers, breaks, that's the type of thing, and perhaps prompt more, model more, go to the low demand tasks that you're working on, and you resume, you continue. You don't want to stop intervention because actually the intervention after a while, ABA, after a while really becomes the routine that makes the child feel safe. Sort of, it's his daily routine, and the child has become accustomed to it. So I would never say stop because you're doing biomedical interventions. I really encourage parents to do both. Ideally, when our parents want to get started with us, we do all the biomedical stuff in the beginning while they're waiting for, let's say, funding or the reports and intake process and so on. And then by the time we get into the behavioral intervention, the child has already started to stabilize a little bit. But I mean, you'll have reactions from the child with various medications, there's no question. And that's another thing that's very important to do both together, is that your behavioral intervention, without going into too much technical terms here, you know, if you do a biomedical intervention, that is what you can think of it this way. That would be considered your independent variable. It's the thing you're trying out to see what kind of effect it has on your child. How do you measure the effect? Yes, a lot of parents will just measure the effect subjectively. Oh, yeah, he seemed more aware, or he seemed to pay attention better. But hey, if you're doing an ABA program, the results of your ABA program end up being your dependent measure, your variable that tells you how the child's actually doing. In other words, if you introduce a medication or a diet or something, and your child suddenly first starts to like escalate a little bit, you keep going with it, and the child starts to improve and does much better now. Oh my gosh, this you can tell the medication's working. In fact, I have data on a number of our kids, especially with antifungals, because I really do think yeast plays a big role. And I see with our kids that after a very small period of time, they accelerate their learning. And so that tells me that there's definitely something going on with the medication that's being given.
Well, this brings up a whole bunch of other questions that I want to follow up with. What is your opinion about, a lot of times when parents are going to start a biomedical intervention along with ABA, there is this moment of deciding, do we tell our ABA practitioners so that they're looking for it? Or do we not say something and see if they notice a change in behavior because they kind of want to get a true read on what's happening? What is your opinion? Do you prefer that they tell or not?
That's a really good question. I think it would be a good idea probably to tell the supervisor, and then the supervisor doesn't necessarily have to tell the therapist what's going on. The reason to tell your supervisor is exactly this type of situation where the child is perhaps not able to focus, is more agitated, those types of things, and you want to make sure that at least the key person on the team knows, because the supervisor can easily modify the program without telling therapists why they're modifying the program. They can, you know, take it back a notch and make it a little bit easier so the child's more successful again. With therapists, the reason not to tell them is because they are the ones that spend most of the time with the child, and it's fabulous if you get therapists coming to you after a while and saying, I don't know what you've done, but it's working because he's doing great right now. And then that's just sort of a confirmation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we had our biomedical and ABA in an era where skills wasn't there. But now on skills, there's a really easy way for parents to be able to chart an event that we started a medicine. I used to keep it on a notepad on the refrigerator, and that would scatter, and
so
you know.
It's hard.
But that it actually, a parent can enter it in on the timeline and say, we started this medication, and then look back 2 weeks later to see on the chart, and it's very clear what happened behaviorally during those 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's what I love. It's the what do we call it? The multi-something timeline, or
the multidisciplinary
timeline, This is one of the graphs that it produces on skills, and so skills is automatically, as you know, producing a line of acquisition, which shows like how much the child's learning, and you can put in all the target challenging behaviors, and it'll track them as well. So you are seeing, hopefully, these target challenging behaviors decreasing and acquisition increasing. And if you input these events, like I started I don't know, diflucan or whatever, antifungal medication, you can see the corresponding results over time, and that's fabulous. Yeah, that's, I love that.
Very enlightening. Thrilled for people having that now. Wished I'd had that. I mean, I could put the two together, but to have that visual, I'm a very visual person, and I love that. Now, I want to talk a little bit, because you mentioned die-off, and for people who are new to this and don't know about yeast and die-off, it isn't perhaps every child's issue, but there are a great many children, and my child was one of them, that yeast was an issue.
Right.
And we saw it very clearly. I guess it presents in different kids, but our child would get beyond silly. We would call him the drunken elf.
Yeah.
He would get the tee-hees and even walk funny.
Right.
And you could smell it on his head and on his breath.
Unbelievable.
He smelled like a fresh loaf of bread sometimes.
What was he on?
Well, eventually we changed diet, and eventually he did some diflucan, and a couple of other things that went along with it. And we did it during the summer months because what we saw, and we were prepared, both by our doctor and by our whole team, letting us know that it was going to get worse before it got better, that die-off thing that you were talking about. And I'm so grateful that I knew that component of it, because the behavior, and in our case, it got much worse for a while.
That's right.
And then it was like a light switch in one day.
Yeah.
He was a different child.
But you know, you're very lucky because it actually had a long-lasting effect. And this is one of the biggest problems I see with the kids who have yeast issues. And I think the common medications are either nystatin, nizoral, or diflucan. There's amphotericin. There's a number of them. But what I see with the kids is there's an initial, the very first time there's an initial die-off period where the child gets very silly and so on, but after that, the child really, you see a pretty significant change when your child has yeast issues and when you treat it appropriately. But the problem is it keeps coming back.
Yeah, we do have that too.
Yeah.
It cycles back, but never as bad as it was. It does cycle, and we really strive to watch diet and the amount of sugar that he gets in his diet. And by sugar, I mean he has no white sugar, but even fruit sugar. We have to ration fruit.
Yeah, and see, that is, I think, the most critical thing, is the diet is what helps you manage the yeast from coming back. Yeah. And you almost have to think about it as a lifelong type of thing, just like kids with celiac. Yeah. I mean, you really do want to watch the food products that will increase yeast growth. Yeah. And that's incredibly important, I think. Otherwise, you're always going to be doing this cycle of on and off antifungals, or some physicians will actually give you sort of a ongoing dose of antifungals, and you know, you have to be careful with that, of course. But the change is so drastic
it was
that it's really important, I think. Yeah.
And it was amazing for us because when the change happened, it was literally the week before kindergarten started. Right. It was optimal. It was an amazing sort of thing. But yes, we are very careful diet-wise, and still he'll cycle in and out. And I mentioned to somebody yesterday, because he just went through the flu, and I don't know if other people at home experience this, but I can tell when he is getting a fever before anything else, because his language changes, and I can tell there's still that much yeast because the high temperature of his fever kills yeast for a period of time.
Right, so his language improves, you're saying. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Right, I know.
Absolutely amazing.
I know.
How he speaks when right as he's going into a fever.
Yep. A lot of parents report that. And I think it is the cycle that you mentioned, and it's just fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I need to remember to videotape in those moments. You know, you're worried about other things, and you know, and getting the vaporizer ready, but
it's crazy.
He talks like he's in college. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, the words that he'll use that I don't even know that he knows. I go, oh, if we could have that all the time without a fever. In any case, the yeast thing, it's an ongoing battle. But the main question that was being asked there was about, do you stop ABA? And I think clearly you said no.
No, you don't. And just to go back and finish up on that, one quick thing is that sometimes I have parents who are doing so many different interventions at the same time, including, you know, I had one parent who had 72 different types of medications or supplements and so on, vitamins, supplements, enzymes, minerals, you name it. And it's just impossible to tell what's going on when you have that much happening at the same time. So really, when you're starting any kind of medical change, I would do it a phase at a time. It doesn't, you keep your ABA program going simply just because it'll help you track things as well. but you introduce the medical or biomedical dietary, I guess, vitamin, nutritional changes one at a time, and let there be at least a couple of weeks period in between so that you can see the effect of each one.
Yeah, I think that's really, really key.
Yeah.
Thank you for adding that. Okay, we had another question about any suggestions for incorporating a social skills program using neurotypical peers into a card skills ABA home program. Any suggestions about that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we have a process that we do for teaching social skills. We first start, I guess, with all of the core content skills that are necessary for the child's age, so that, you know, the actual skill itself, you know, being able to, I guess, read facial expression, being able to have a certain level of ability of knowing when to join a conversation, knowing how to interrupt appropriately, all that sort of stuff. So if the child has the core competency stuff, then the way that we phase into social interaction is we will go first with an adult, and you know, of course, the child is with an adult, that's the therapist, but we don't want the therapist because we really want an adult who doesn't know how to guide the child or prompt, just a typical adult, and see how interactions are with the adults. Typically our kids do much better with adults anyway. And then from there, one peer, which we call play dates, and the peer comes to the child's session, and the therapist will kind of moderate between the child and the peer. And when we've reached a certain level of mastery there, where there's a decent level of interaction between our child and the single peer, then we will start introducing groups of peers. So we won't go straight into a social group because that becomes too difficult for our child, but then we'll go to, let's say, 2 or 3 kids. And really that's the setting that you will have then in school, and it'll be the most common type of situation where the child enters. So yeah, we're always using typically developing kids to help our children model and know what they're supposed to do. I find that with our, let's say I guess the highest number of our kids would be little boys, you know, given the ratio difference in autism. And so I find that the best teachers for our little boys are slightly older girls. So like if I have a 4 or 5-year-old boy, then I'm looking for, unless the child's already developed a friendship with someone, then I would be looking for, let's say, a 7, 8-year-old girl, just because the slightly older girls are much more teacher-like, and they like to take you and lead you and model and teach and that sort of thing, whereas other boys tend to not have that same level of interest or patience.
Right. They're more laid back. You're always very politically correct about it, and I always say those girls are the bossy girls.
Oh, they're the best.
It's that age, and
they're the best.
really remarkable. Yesterday we were showing the A word, and they were having a clinic, and in the clinic they were talking about scheduling outings and going to regular outings, and I was making the case to our families at home who are watching, when you have an ABA program, how, you know, a lot of times there's this stigma attached to having an intensive ABA program that you're stuck at home with the child, and it's this intensive behavior, and that part of our job, as I see it as parents, is making it conducive to taking that program out of the home and giving it legs in the community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Teaching the child. We do so many programs out in the community.
Yes.
I mean, you have to. How are you going to know if the child can function in a restaurant unless you actually go there?
Yeah.
A lot of our stranger stuff that we teach the child to avoid strangers or to be able to identify a stranger happens in stores, you know.
Yes.
And,
and taking the therapist with you, the whole concept. I do hear parents say from time to time, oh, we did an intensive ABA program, but we couldn't do it for long because, you know, I have grocery shopping to do, and I have Christmas shopping to do, and I have, you know, this meeting to go to. And my answer always to that is take the therapist with you.
Absolutely.
It's one of my favorite things to take a therapist to a birthday party.
Right.
Because kids are going to behave differently around me than they will around a young adult who crawls into the bouncy house with them.
Right.
it's amazing the things that your child can learn at a birthday party with a therapist.
Definitely.
So making the case for that. And you can create, if you're doing the skills program at home, you can create that. You just need more adults to be able to do
Absolutely.
that. Okay, great. Next question I want to do, we have a couple of different questions about sleep. So this one, how do I get my 5-year-old severely nonverbal son to sleep more than 90 minutes at a time? His melatonin levels are quote unquote normal. And we actually had another question on Facebook that I'll bring up too that was also, I believe, about sleep. Oh no, it's about obsessions and compulsiveness. I'll come back to that. But we had another question that was also about sleep. And I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but this 90 minutes at a time for specifically. And again, I want to, before you start, I want to remind everybody that we never want to be in the position of making it seem like we're giving child-specific advice.
I was just about to say that. Yeah,
it's a terrible disservice to your child to assume that you can write us one sentence and that even someone such as yourself could know every possible configuration of what's going on. So I just want to remind everybody that Dr. Granpeesheh will give us some generalities that we can take and learn more from, but that we never want to make it seem as though we're giving specific
Absolutely.
advice.
And I think in these cases where there's so many questions that I would ask in order to be able to give an intervention, I will try to help the parent maybe understand some of the things they have to assess. So, if your child's, first of all, it would be a whole different story if the child is, let's say the child's sleeping for 90 minutes at a time. I'd want to know right off the bat how many times. So what's the total duration? What's the period of time in between these 90 minutes? And what's happening in between these periods of time? Because just like babies, I don't know, if you remember when you have a newborn, and if every time that the baby wakes up, you immediately run in there and give them water or milk or something, they will be trained to wake up.
Right. It's a good time.
It's a good time.
You take care of me. I wake up.
It's not even. I don't think it's even a conscious decision. It becomes a sort of a physical chemistry type thing where you learn, just like we have learned. Have you noticed, like, okay, there's no such thing that you have to eat every, 4 hours or something. And people are very different in that. Some people need to eat every 2 hours, others can go 6 hours, whatever it is, but we have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? So it's a time frame that we have mentally set, and if you don't have something at lunch, you're going to start feeling hungry just because it's lunchtime.
Right.
Okay, so it's the same thing with kids and babies. Their body goes on this calendar, on this schedule of, I need to wake up at these intervals because that's my feeding time. And so I don't know, typically the biggest one is feeding. Any kind of food, water, whatever will put your body in that type of schedule. So I don't know if with this child, the 90 minutes, every time the child wakes up from the 90 minutes, the most important piece of data that I'm missing here is what happens when the child wakes up. Right. Because if there's any kind of food, water, even social, like consoling the child or interaction with the child has gone into a schedule of these are the periods of time. What wakes the child up to begin with could potentially just be their body signaling, I need to get up now because I'm going to get some milk or whatever it is. Or it could be other things, which are, I'm going to go on the things I would assess when you have any kind of sleep disorder. I would really assess seizure activity. I'd want to go see a neurologist and make sure that, do a sleepy EEG, figure out that there's nothing else going on with my child. Are there actually subclinical seizures perhaps that are waking the child up pretty routinely? But you need to really check that. That's very, very important. So then the biggest thing that I would be intervening with is that what happens in between the sessions. And again, I don't know, like maybe a child sleeps, in this case, maybe the child's sleeping 90 minutes and that's it. And then 4 hours later sleeping 90 minutes. And you have to be very careful because you don't want to be reinforcing the child's awake time during the night in any way. In other words, the child should really not have any other option but sleep. That's what I'm trying to say. So they shouldn't have the option of coming over to your bed. They shouldn't have the option of having toys that they can play with. with, because those are all going to be things the child's going to prefer over sleeping. And if you do that for about 3 or 4 or 5 days where the child really has no other option, and I know that it'll be difficult, obviously, because the child will not want to stay in their bed, and but they will gradually start to increase the duration of time. If the child's taking a nap at any other time of the day, cut that out. If, you know, there's so many different things that I would ask to find out more about this situation. I have found, and I've said this before, and this is personally for me, I also use it with my kids. I have found that there's you can buy it everywhere now. It's called Tranquil Sleep. It's it's a combination of tryptophan and melatonin, and I found that it's significantly different than just taking melatonin alone.
Okay.
For me, also, if I take melatonin alone, which when I travel, it'll barely put me to sleep. It will, and then it'll wake me up shortly after. So melatonin actually itself has a cycle period too, where it wakes you up after a period of time, either 4 hours, 6 hours, depends on the amount and the type of melatonin. But when I have found that when it's in a chewable tablet together with 5-HTP, tryptophan, it will not do that. It'll be much, much better. It'll help you go through 6 hours at least, and a really nice deep sleep. Other alternatives that the family could use if the child is healthy are things like Benadryl, which will actually just make the child a little bit more drowsy. In other words, with the consultation of your physician, and after you've ruled out any neurological issues, what I would do is both a medical and behavioral at the same time, which is I would make sure that the duration of time that the child needs to sleep, let's say 6 hours minimum, the child is in their room and not able to interact or do anything else. It doesn't matter how much they complain about that. If they're healthy and there's nothing else going on, then let the child scream it through if they need to. Or you can also increase it gradually. You don't have to go straight to 6 hours. But your goal is to get up there. And so what you do is you help the child with some sort of medical, let's say, supplement, whether it's melatonin, a 5-HTP, or Benadryl, or even some other type of sleeping aid from your medical doctor. And on the behavioral end, you make sure that the child is, you know, building up towards that 6 hours period at least, and then of course higher than that.
Okay, great advice. I want to talk just a little bit about the, you know, the expression that you use, the letting them scream it through and not having other things, just to clarify in terms of, because it's hard sometimes as a parent to know exactly, you know, I really think when you're in it, it's so different than looking at it from the outside, because first of all, at that point you're tired and so on and so forth. So just want a little bit of clarification about, because I know recently somebody had said to me about that moment when, if the child's getting up out of bed and what else is available. And pointing out to me that I needed to be quiet and laying down with the lights out too, because otherwise if I had lights on somewhere, that he was going to be like a moth and coming to that. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be a battle, is that the case? But that, you know, having us not attend to what's happening, but not letting them have access to the toys and lights on and TV and games and us. Is that?
And again, it has to do with the age of the child and the habits of the child. If the child has been sleeping with you, then that's an additional factor that needs to be dealt with. But let's assume that the child is in their own room and waking up every 90 minutes, and if they do, then they're possibly either coming to you or calling you. And that is when it becomes very difficult. And I'll be honest, most of the time it's going to be difficult. It's going to be very difficult. It's not like the child's just going to lay down and say, okay, they're not coming, I'm going to sleep. It is going to be difficult because the child is going to want the comfort of being with you, or of perhaps getting a bottle, of getting water, and that sort of stuff. So you will need to be tough in this. You will have to be. There's no other way to do it. And like I said, if you the fastest way is just to say, this week I am going to have my child in his room for 5 or 6 hours. no matter what.
Right.
And you can put a camera in there, obviously, nowadays, and you can see everything that's going on with that child, really being aware of it. A slower way, which is perhaps more gentle on the parent,
Yes.
is to gradually increase so like the child wakes up at 90 minutes, don't interact with the child for another half hour.
Okay.
Right? And then now you've brought it up to 2 hours.
Okay.
And then the next 3 nights later, you make that 3 hours, and 3 nights later, you make that 4 hours. It's going to kill you. It's exhausting to do this. I mean, I did this with my last child. I used to sit outside her room while she was crying, you know, and I know the temptation, because you can't bear to hear your child crying, and you want to go in and do whatever you can, whether it's yell at the child or comfort them.
Right.
You're just at your wit's end. It's the middle of the night, and it's your 20th night or whatever it is, right? So. But you can't, because the more you interact with the child, you are just training the body of the child and the physiology of the child to just keep awakening at that time frame. And really, there's so many other things you can put soothing sounds, one of those machines in the child's room. You have to make sure that everything is dark.
Right.
Darkness really does actually help with sleep. There's all these other factors where you can make things a little bit easier, but it's not an easy process. It's not pleasant, but hey, it is fast, and it is definitely a learned behavior.
Okay.
It could potentially, that's why I said rule out neurological stuff.
Sure.
Because it could initiate with something biomedical, biochemical, but the fact that it keeps happening after the child, if you've ruled out everything else, means that it's really learned.
Okay, which means we can change it.
And you can change it, and it's more tough on the parent than it is on the child.
Okay.
Really.
Fabulous.
But and again, going back to this issue, I can't emphasize how important this is, because sleep is the most important factor for our kids to actually be able to learn. Like, we don't take into consideration when a child is waking up every 90 minutes, not only is he wiped out, exhausted, when you look at his biochemistry, it's going to be completely messed up. He's not, when you don't sleep 5 hours straight, you're not producing any adrenaline. A lot of your neurotransmitters are off now because your cycle has been messed up. So you're not producing all the various types of things that stimulate your body or help you focus or energize or communicate internally.
So learning is not going to be optimal, and coping is not going to be...
It's just going to fall apart.
Right.
Child's going to be tired, tantruming, therefore failing at their intervention. It's just going to be a mess.
Okay. So
sleep is incredibly important.
Okay, great. We're going to take a little bit of a break, and when we come back, we'll deal with a question that we had on Facebook about obsessions and compulsions.
Great.
So stick with us. More with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh after these messages.
Every child with autism deserves a bright future.
Without further clarification, the Affordable Care Act could actually result in less benefits for individuals with autism spectrum disorders.
We urge Catherine Sebelius to clarify the Affordable Health Care Act.
She can make one change, one little minor change, to make applied behavioral analysis be part of the health care plan.
By signing this petition, you are protecting the health care benefits of individuals with autism spectrum disorders.
We need to make sure
that we are heard
and seen.
Sign a petition at autism-live.com.
Here's how you can show your infinite support. Create your own infinity ribbon. What you're gonna do is take a ribbon that's been cut about 8 inches long, and you're gonna grab one end and then twist it, and then take the two ends and join them together, and then take it together. And then I'm gonna flip it around and take another piece of tape. And what I have is double-sided sticky tape. Squeeze down. You have your very own infinity ribbon.
With ABA,
the possibilities are infinite.
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 With ABA,
the possibilities are infinite. With ABA,
The possibilities are infinite. Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, a brilliant, brilliant visionary in the field of autism. So thrilled to have you here. We're answering your questions. There are a lot coming in. I know we're not going to get to all of them, but we're going to try to get to as many as we can in the next few minutes. But keep them coming in because we'll get to them next week and the weeks after. Somebody wrote in on Facebook, what is an effective and natural way to help a child with autism deal with their obsessions and compulsiveness? There's a blogger that I love who posted not too long ago, you know, most of the time I'm fine, but every once in a while I want to take autism and her twin sister anxiety out to the woodshed and whip them.
Yeah.
And a lot of us went, oh, you're singing my song.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and I've talked about that a lot as well. In fact, I think in March, I'm giving a keynote presentation on just the topic of anxiety here somewhere in Orange County.
Okay, let us know when that is approaching because that sounds fascinating.
So this is a big issue. All of the, you know, what we call in the diagnosis of autism, the self-stimulatory behaviors, in my opinion, the majority of them are connected to anxiety. And OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder, is one of the anxiety disorders. There's 6, and OCD is one of them. And so when you see obsessive compulsive behavior in autism, you can be pretty certain that the child is experiencing some form of anxiety.
Okay.
So then you want to start thinking about, why is my child feeling anxious? And the reasons can be a million different reasons, obviously, and this is why it always helps, I think. I tell the parents that I work with, just stand in your child's shoes for a minute, like really see the world from his or her perspective. It's very important because you will see that if it's let's say a highly impacted autistic child who has very little communication ability, the minute that they become aware of what's going on around them, they will feel anxious because they are aware of it, but not able to comprehend it, not able to interact with it, not able to figure out, problem solve, and get their own needs met. I mean, that produces anxiety. I could list a billion things that produce anxiety, like not only environmental factors and the fact that, you know, I always give the example that when I was in Hong Kong a few years ago, I was really, really jet lagged, hadn't had a lot of sleep, had a lot of coffee to stay awake and keep working, and couldn't read anything, any signs. I was lost, couldn't find my hotel, extremely dirty environment, downtown Hong Kong, lots of lights and noises and so on. And hey, I mean, that was anxiety, you know, and all I wanted to do was get back to my hotel and put down the shutters and lock the doors and just get in bed, you know, which is really how our kids react as well. So environmentally, you have to, the very first thing, you know, when you see OCD in a child, you have to, first of all, you have to figure out, is it chronic? Is it does the child feel anxious in all settings, or is it certain specific environments that are making the child anxious? So if you're in specific environments, let's say school, or parties, or anything, you know, like you find children who become extremely obsessive compulsive when they go to a party. That for me is an immediate connection. Oh, okay, it's the sound level perhaps, because it's so much different at a party or at school. Maybe it's the demands. It's just that the child's becoming more aware of the other peers and realizing that he or she can't fit in. Embarrassment. It's the stuff we want our kids to develop.
Yeah.
And as they develop it, obviously they're going to be anxious. You know, embarrassment at a high level is anxiety.
Yes.
So when you want to change the environmental factors, so that means you want to make sure that the child in those settings is much more reinforced, there's much more modeling or prompting going on. Make the environment easier for the child. In other circumstances, it's not environmental, but it could be just medical issues that are leading to anxiety. For example, if your child has a lot of GI issues. I don't know if you think about it yourself, if you have a day where you've had something that doesn't settle well with you, and you're back and forth in the bathroom or whatever, and you have, let's say, diarrhea, the feeling that accompanies it is anxiety.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. It's not really anxiety. It's anxiety just because it's a stimulated state it's an agitated state. So your biochemistry could be in an agitated state, and we see that with our kids who go to the bathroom like 10 times a day or have bowel movements 10 times a day. Those kids are for sure going to have a certain level of anxiety.
Yeah.
No question. How about the sensory issues with our kids? Our kids, the ones that love to be held and squeezed and their skin pressed, well, guess what? That's because most of the time they feel like their skin's crawling. That's a sensation that's very similar to anxiety. So all of those types of things could be potential reasons. And, you know, from a behavioral perspective, I suppose, you identify those and you try to fix them, right? If it's a sensory type issue, you want to make sure the child is getting, these are children who would do very well with the weighted vests.
Right.
When you really give the child a whole diet of or a regimen of having tactile stimulation so that they feel calmer. Yeah. Do the correct sensory interventions so the child can feel more safe or calm. With the biomedical issues, obviously try to treat the stomach issues or anything else that might be causing the child to feel that way. And with the environmental factors, again, try to change the environments, make them less demand, higher reward. It's always that formula that makes it successful for our kids. And you know, I think the parent had written natural ways of dealing with anxiety. And the interesting thing is that, you know, melatonin leads to the production of the combination of this is the stream that is sort of like tryptophan, melatonin does affect the serotonin, one of our neurotransmitters that deals with anxiety. And so when you have a child, so you could also go that route and do the natural forms of serotonin. That would definitely be helpful in some kids.
Right.
And when you go to medicine, the SSRIs, or the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, are the medications that are given for anxiety, and they are serotonin. You know, they stop your own body from reuptaking the serotonin in between the cells, so you have more serotonin.
Right.
So increasing serotonin levels should typically help the child to calm down a little bit. And so, and you know, those are some just very, very general overviews.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Really informative. We have somebody who wrote it and said, first, they love your new haircut.
Oh, thank you.
Second, my question is, my third grade mainstream son can sometimes pass for being typical. I have a sense of guilt when I enroll him in adaptive lessons, always questioning my choices like, does he really need extra help? Would he be better off without extra help? Am I holding him back? He has a full-time aide in mainstream school. I ask myself, is the aide holding him back? Then again, I wonder if all supports disappeared, would he regress? I never know what is right, and it's so frustrating. Thank you. And I think a lot of us can relate to that, about there comes a point when, you know, and it's a quality problem.
Yes.
When our child is doing really well, and how much support to have and how to fade it, I think is a big question.
Right, and that's, you just gave away the answer.
I did? I didn't hear it. Tell me.
I mean, it is really just a matter of, you don't just pull the support, you fade it.
Okay.
And so really the answer is, I would say that the best thing you can do for this parent is to just have the aide, first of all, be a little bit less involved in, and we always transition our aides out. We never just pull them.
Yeah.
So you will have the aide be less and less involved with interaction with the child. In other words, the aide will go to just sort of standing behind or standing at the back of the classroom, only coming forward when they're necessary, that sort of thing. Then you can also go to, if you're working with an agency, what we do is we put a different aide in who is an unknown aide to the child. So it's kind of a confederate aide. It's someone that's not, the child won't recognize as their own therapist, because there's going to be a level of dependency between the child as well. So we'll put an aide in the classroom, and the teacher, of course, knows what's going on, but the child doesn't know that this is one of their therapists. And the aide will now help the teacher with everything, anything the teacher wants, including, of course, keeping an eye on our child.
Right.
So that's another stage of fading out. And then you will gradually decrease the presence of that individual to different time frames. Like if with a lot of our kids, they're doing great in class, they need a little bit more assistance, perhaps on the playground or at lunchtime, those types of things. So we will have the aide only be present in those time frames and then gradually decrease that and fade it out. And if at any point you see that the child is falling apart or really does start to deteriorate in how they're progressing in school, then you will want to reinstate the aide.
Yeah.
This is something that you're really working very closely with the teacher, because as your aide fades out, the teacher needs to be fully aware of what's going on, and you have to be sure that the child is responding 100% to the teacher, even better than they respond to the aide, so that the teacher takes what we call stimulus control. So the teacher has control over anything and everything.
Right. Is it me, though, that it feels like schools don't understand this progression? That, as I was listening to you describing the optimal situation of fading an aide, it's the complete opposite of what usually happens at an IEP meeting and what is stressed by the school. The first place that they take the aide off of usually is lunchtime and the playground.
Right.
I hear that so many parents frustrated with that, and that they will often take the aide, they fade the aide out at a time when it's conducive for them, which is usually the end of the day,
right,
which is when the child needs the most support.
Right.
There is a frustration that I feel that, at what point are schools going to start to listen to organizations such as yourself to understand the proper way in which to do this?
And I think I guess we have to be careful, because there are some schools that are really good at this, and other schools that really are overwhelmed and can't deal with these issues. I think it is more the responsibility of the lead ABA person, the supervisor, let's say, in our organization. It's the supervisor that attends IEPs with the parent and the school. And if the supervisor is able to explain things just like I did right now, I have no question that the school will generally, most of the time, understand exactly why we want the aide and how we want to reduce the 8 hours. I think in most cases for schools it's just a budgetary issue and they want to drop aides as fast as they can. And I think that if we're able to tell them, okay, we'll get there in 3 months or in 6 months, but this is how it needs to be done.
Exactly.
Then it tends to work out a little bit better. Having said that, I mean, there are schools that won't even allow us on campus. So it's important for everyone to kind of come together and make decisions that work. And I think we may be getting there, Shannon, just because I think the whole system is changing now that there's insurance coverage.
Yes.
Because schools, I think, feel less of a burden in terms of the financial aspect of things, and so they might become more collaborative.
I hope that you're right, and I appreciate you pointing out that some schools are already getting it, and more and more schools are getting it.
Terrific.
And when we can explain to them, I do think that they, for the most part, schools want to help our children. I just think sometimes they don't have the training and the knowledge, but we can more and more provide that.
Absolutely, and that's very true. And we are providing a lot of that on IBT, on our behavioral training website. And sometimes we have to understand that the entire world of ABA consists of very young people who have gotten a degree in behavior analysis and are now going into schools telling these teachers who've been there for 20, 30 years what to do. And that is difficult for anyone. You spend your entire life. I mean, I think I work a lot on trying to be a humble person. Like, humility is important to me, but if someone at this point in my life came and said, by the way, everything you've been doing is wrong and from now on you need to do this, I think I'd have a very hard time with that as well. So it's understandable, I think, for the teachers to be a little reactive and to kind of question a lot of the stuff that we do. especially teachers who are strong and they don't even realize that they've been doing a lot of behavioral stuff well.
Yes.
And so it just needs to be a little bit more collaborative, I think.
There we go. Well, we will definitely work towards that. We're out of time, unfortunately, but I thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, always.
We'll be back more with next week with more of these questions. We do keep them on file, and as you see, we will cycle some of them back in, so keep those questions coming. We're going to go to the A word and check in with Jack Riley. This is a wonderful documentary being made here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, following this little boy as he starts and continues through his intensive ABA program. And so we'll check out what's happening with Jack Riley, and when we come back, we're going to be joined by Nancy Allspaw-Jackson for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. We have a wonderful advocate who's going to be here with us talking about when you need a lawyer, when you need an advocate, and what an advocate can do for you. So stick with us for that. But now check out our wonderful series, The A Word.
Jack Riley. Jack Riley, say hi, Mommy.
Hi, Mommy.
Turn and look at me when you say hi, Mommy.
Hi, Mommy.
Good try.
Hi,
everybody. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
So how are things?
They're good.
Yeah.
He's doing great. He's he had a incident.
What are you gonna
4th of July, we were out swimming with another
play with?
family out there, and he pushed a little girl in the pool, a little 3-year-old.
Was he playing or?
Well, yeah, she was jumping in, and there was the steps, and her dad was watching. She jumped in and sort of paddled to the steps, and she kept doing it. And he was laughing, and she was laughing, and then he just helped her.
Mickey.
So it wasn't malicious, but
Yeah, he wasn't angry. I think it was.
and they did it again though, after we so we took him in.
More than like 5 minutes, I didn't make note of it.
You want a cracker? We'll come and get it.
There are two skills being displayed by Jack Riley right now. One is that he made eye contact, and the other is independently requesting an item without any prompting. These are both skills that he and his parents and therapists have been working on.
Can you say, I want a cracker?
I want cracker.
Can you say, I want a cracker?
Cheryl is prompting Jack Riley to use more than one word for his requests to build on his vocal skills. When Jack Riley began services 3 months ago, he was non-vocal with very little verbal skills. To be verbal is to communicate, whether it's with a gesture or signing or using pictures, for example. To be vocal is to communicate with audible words.
So if you had to pick maybe like your top 3 things to work on like when you're out in the community.
Trying to figure out what will make him compliant, in public when there's a lot of people. He kind of took off twice for the street.
It's inconsistent enough that you can't count on it. There's days that are great and days where he does one of them.
Or he'll say go.
And then, yeah, go. He says stop and he says go and starts up again.
Him staying with us, him even just walking hand in hand without, I'd say within fewer than 10 steps, he goes noodle and sits down.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an outing section in here. And then if you want whenever it works for you guys, at least if we can do it at least once a week. One of these guys go on an outing to wherever you guys normally go.
Just to start getting him used to that. Because it seems, with the activity, everything changes a little bit from him. Just gets so excited. And that's when I think most reason stops for him. And most of what he learns sort of goes out the window.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna spiral down. Spiral, spiral, spiral. Yay! Oh.
To me, he sounds like he's talking more than before. I don't know. That's what I observed. Huh. You're talking a whole lot today. Do you want to play with your trains? Yes. Good. Okay, should we open?
Open.
Okay. Say open, please. But the fact that he is actually communicating is really, really cool. And they're actually words instead of just, utterances or, gestures. Yeah, it's really incredible. Incredible. Say let's go.
Let's go.
Okay. Choo-choo, come on.
Right Right there, Jack Riley independently began playing with his train appropriately. What you see is what a typically developing kid would do, naturally. But kids with autism, most skills need to be taught until the behavior becomes natural. At this age, half of the ABA therapy occurs while the child is playing. The other half is in a structured environment and at the table, like you've seen in other episodes.
You want the train station?
Twice.
Station.
Yes.
That's a hard word. Station.
Yes.
Do you want it?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Wow, his yeses are very good.
They are.
Oh, and for NVI, we're also doing two-step actions within play. So like basically whatever it is he's playing with, we just have to do two-step actions, and he has to be able to imitate whatever we do. Do this. Choo-choo. You do it. Say choo-choo.
Choo-choo.
Good job. Okay, let's put it on the track here. Do this. Choo-choo. It's Riley's turn. Say choo-choo. Yeah, here we go. So it's like little actions like that. Just, putting the train on the track, making it go, putting items in the train, imitating even vocally, like what we say during play. Like, here we go, choo-choo. Just so this will help generalize when he goes to preschool, because other kids will, be playing with trains too, and children naturally just imitate each other.
Right now, Jessica and Jack Riley are practicing using yes and no appropriately.
Do you want the shoe?
Yes.
Okay, here you go.
Yes.
Say no.
No.
Good. Stop. Put your fingers. Do you want the shoe?
Yes.
Say no.
No.
Good. So do you want the shoe?
No.
Okay. Do you want the ball toy?
Yes.
Okay, here you go.
Bottle.
Here you go. All right, it's over. Okay, here. Do you want a diaper?
Yes. No.
No. Okay. Do you want a diaper?
No.
Okay. Do you want a ball toy?
No.
No. Do you want the cars?
No.
No. Do you want a Nemo car?
No.
Okay. Do you want bubbles?
No.
No.
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Boo puppy.
Pop, 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 pop.
Boo puppy. Boo puppy.
Hi. Can you sit up though? Sit up. Stand up. Ready? Set.
We have new snacks for him because we started to incorporate gluten yesterday. So I've got some stuff
Oh, okay,
that he hasn't had in a long time. We tried putting cut up bananas on his pancake plate last week, and not so well. He just threw them down. So I thought that kind of stuff would be easier now because he's been doing so well, and he's not. So we're still gonna have to have the battles, and I think we're just so happy to be done with the first battle, that we're sort of reluctant to start a new one, which is to start introducing new foods.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is now that we're taking him off of the GFCF stuff, we have more things to introduce him to.
Definitely.
And maybe he'll just get less anxious if we're giving him things that he used to love this stuff, but we took him off of it. He won't remember, but maybe it won't be such a big deal if some of the new foods he's getting are things that he's loving. You want to try cereal bar?
Ooh, yummy.
Are you looking funny?
Oh, Jack Riley.
Look better. Do you want to try cereal bar?
Cereal bar.
Cereal bar. Good talking.
Cereal bar.
You want to try?
Cereal bar.
Cereal bar.
Crystal clear.
Cookie.
You want to try?
Cereal bar.
Try these.
I love these.
So yummy.
I like them.
You want cereal bar?
I cereal bar.
Mommy,
Bobby.
I want.
I want cereal bar.
Good job.
That was a good
That was
sentence.
very clear.
Yeah.
Slow.
Cereal
He
bar.
sees it. So the more subtle we can go, the.
Cereal bar.
Do you want more?
Bar.
Can you say I want more cereal bar?
Cereal bar.
I
I
want
want
more.
more. Syllable.
Good job.
Syllable.
Yeah.
Syllable.
It is a cereal. That's your new favorite word.
You have a new favorite, don't you?
Cereal bar. Who's here? Who's here?
Tell Daddy what you just ate.
What did you just eat? Did you eat something?
What did you eat, Jack? Tell Daddy. Goldfish.
Goldfish.
Goldfish?
And what else did you have?
Anything else?
What else did you have?
What else did you eat, Jack?
Syllable.
What is it?
Good, that's answering a question. Like she asked if you could do that.
What is it?
Syllable.
A Nutri-Grain bar. So he
You
just
ate a Nutri-Grain bar?
And the fact that he turned to Daddy to say that too, that was big.
Just right there. Did you catch it on camera, Suzanne?
Yeah, I did.
That was really, and it was so
And
good.
he just answered questions about the past to you.
About what?
He just answered questions about the past. Like he never.
That's true.
The doctor
Right.
last week asked if he could do that.
Okay, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just right here. Right here.
The reason Cheryl is excited about Jack Riley answering Mike's question is that he was able to understand what he said and could recall what he had done in the past without any cues in front of him to remind him. Recalling something in your mind is a complex skill. This is a big leap. It means he grasped language.
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Allspaw-Jackson.
And I'm Shannon Penrod.
And it's good to be with you here today on this Wednesday.
It's always great when you come. You bring an energy with you. That's great.
I notice we're both in purple, kind of varying shades of purple.
We got the memo.
The passion color.
Yeah.
And we're passionate.
That's right.
About all things related to autism and helping families out there that are listening to make their lives better and the lives of their children.
Absolutely.
So we like to start with sharing what's in the news, and our good friends behind the feature dramatic film, The Story of Luke.
Yes, we had them on a few weeks ago.
We had them on a few weeks ago. We were so blown away by the young actor who plays Luke. He is just fantastic. And just for those of you who might have missed it, this is a film about a young man aging upward who has autism, and his caretakers, his beloved grandparents, are no longer there, and he gets stuck with other relatives, and it's all about his journey to become a fully realized young man with a job and a girlfriend.
It's a beautiful film.
It is a beautiful film.
And it's a really beautiful portrayal of a person on the spectrum. And we said to him when he was here, Lou Taylor Pucci, who plays the role of Luke, that we're probably the toughest critics because being parents, we were
being
looking at his
boys.
Yeah, we were looking at his performance with a fine-tooth comb, and it was beautiful.
It was great.
Just beautiful.
It was great. So they are going to on Sunday. This Sunday. Wow, I can't believe it's January 20th. This Sunday. Hello.
Yes.
We have, there's going to be a screening at the Irvine International Film Festival.
Here in California.
Here in California at the Edwards West Park 8. And it's at 6:30 p.m. And we urge all of you that would be able to make it to attend that screening. It's just an excellent film, and I think you'll come away from it feeling very, first of all, not alone if you have a child with autism, and just great point of discussion. And we're all dealing with what is our society going to do as our kids age upwards.
But know too that it is a very funny, heartwarming, uplifting film as well. Very funny in all the appropriate ways that we would want a film to be funny. So really lovely, entertaining. But I think you'll really enjoy it. And I know so many of you, when we had them here and we were talking about the film, you were saying, where can we see it? Where can we? And we said we would let you know. So here's an opportunity.
Here's an opportunity, and we understand that they're about to get a distributor.
There we go.
So we're going to let you know about that. And we are also talking with Alonzo, the director, and Nina, the producer, who are a married couple, who we're also talking to them about being involved in a screening.
Very
so
good.
we'll let everybody know about that as it develops. But you can go this Sunday January 20th, 6:30 p.m., Irvine International Film Festival.
Okay, and we've got a lot of other stuff in the news.
Yeah.
Both of us really loved this story about a group of moms who I love dads too. Not saying anything, but I love it when moms get together because they're very practical.
They are.
And this group of moms got together after Hurricane Sandy and said, we have some work to do.
Yes.
Absolutely love this. So much tragedy and destruction that came in the path of Sandy. And I know things are different for me now, that when I see things like that, I feel for everybody. But the question comes up for me about what would it be like with a child on the autism spectrum?
I always think that
happen?
any tragedy, any natural disaster in our country, hurricanes, any time where people are displaced, I think about our families with children with autism. And we actually, at ACT Today, have a fun ACT SOS that we have a family in right now who have 3 children on the spectrum whose house was further destroyed. They were in need of a fence anyway because of elopement issues. So if you're into helping that particular family, you can go to our ACT Today website and look at our ACT SOS program.
Right, and we're going to talk more about the SOS program a little later on in today's show.
So let's talk about what these moms are doing.
Yeah, and so they're all women with children on the autism spectrum, and they got together and they formed a group called My Time Inc. It's based in Brooklyn, and they're a support group now. The founder of the group, Lucina Clark, was really able to gather together this group of women. They meet regularly at a place called the Holy Family School in Canarsie.
Okay.
Don't you love the name Canarsie?
Yeah.
Isn't that a New York name?
It is.
And they have set up a recovery center in the same school where the group meets.
Okay.
And their whole purpose is to make it easier for the families of children with autism to be able to get through this difficult time to support each other, which I just think is remarkable.
It's great. Now, did the article say whether they can bring their children?
I believe that they do.
Okay,
that
they
come and they bring the children with them to the support group, and beautiful, beautiful group of women. And it does say that most of the parents are single moms with 2 children with autism. So imagine with 2 or 3 children with autism. And the quote is, it's difficult to find a place where they can meet other women who are going through the same thing, and it's so important.
We know how important it is to share our stories, and we often get helpful hints and helpful direction from another mom that can change our lives for our children.
Absolutely, we've both experienced that.
Yes. So how can they learn more?
You can get a hold of them. Their website is www.mytimeinc.org, or you can call them. There is a phone number, 718-251-0527. Again, that phone number is 718-251-0527. And their website is www.mytimeinc.org. Really wonderful thing.
So if you're feeling isolated, if you're feeling alone, if you're having a hard time with a child on the spectrum because of the Hurricane Sandy upheaval in your life, please reach out to this group. You'll find support, and we know that knowing you're not alone is the first step.
Absolutely. And then we've got a bunch of new studies where we have very little time to talk about them, so we're going to give a brief overview. There's a new study out about the immune system, and that we're hearing more and more about the role that the immune system plays in the prevalence of autism. And this particular study that was just published in December in the journal PLOS One, they were looking specifically about viral versus bacterial immune issues.
And they were looking at pregnant women, correct? And how viral infections might affect the fetus.
Yeah.
So I think the summary of this was basically that reduced production of interferons, it doesn't say interferons, I know that word, but interferons can delay control of viral infections in a pregnant woman and her fetus. Consequently, viral infections result in the production of chemokines, which play a role in brain development. When combined, these two processes can potentially alter the brain development in a fetus.
Yeah. Now
So-
we've been hearing a lot of the media. What they take away from these studies is very interesting to me. And of course, in December, people were saying, make sure you get your flu shot,
right?
Because you don't want a viral infection while you're pregnant. Well, there are some other considerations that we've talked about before on the show, because the flu shot we know does contain thimerosal. There is mercury in the flu shot, so people want to be really well informed,
because that plays into the immune system as well.
It absolutely does, and you don't want to try to take care of one problem by creating potential for another problem.
Yes, yes.
So
we know that if there is a situation where there is a weakened immune system, we have to be very careful about introducing anything, any medicine, any substance that has the ability to, in some way, damage the immune system.
Absolutely.
So with thimerosal and a flu shot, that would be something that I think would be cause for concern for any pregnant mother.
Yeah, take a look at what your options are, be informed, and make the best possible decision for yourself. But they are seeing, immune system does play a role. There's also a new study that came out about bullying, and of course we're always interested in that.
Always.
And the takeaway from it was that it causes significant short-term emotional and physical consequences for children on the autism spectrum. I know sometimes we see these studies and we go, well, duh, but it's very important, because what we see a lot of times as parents is that something happens and the school response will be like, well, we don't allow bullying, but kids will be kids. And this kind of thing adds to the arsenal of when we're going in and saying not acceptable, even a small amount can cause significant concern for our kids.
What stood out for me was that 14% of the children that were on the spectrum, their parents completed the survey. There were over 1,200 children whose parents completed the survey. 14% of the children with ASDs that were bullied constantly were feared for their safety.
Yes.
They had, so you can imagine a child going to school fearing for their own safety. This is not a situation that is okay at all.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that we know, the law states very clearly that when somebody has any kind of a disability and they're being harassed, it's another level of concern because of these kinds of things. And there's another level of law that goes along with it. It's not allowed. It's against law. Schools cannot allow that kind of thing to be perpetrated. And, I know I certainly have been in the circumstance where my child felt that he was being bullied and the case was being made that somebody was saying, well, it just doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal what happened. And I know my response was, but that's not his perception of it. And it may be that the child is of no harm to your child and they've said something, and children do say things. But if our child is going to take it in such a way that they fear for their safety, that's a problem. And I'm constantly saying to people, what is and his reaction to it may not be the same.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the fact the way that that's how he's responding to it.
Right. So
and they
figures
said
that back up that this is a very much an issue among our population of children with autism spectrum disorders, higher rates of bullying.
70%, they're saying, said that they had been bullied. And what I also found significant was that they were saying that 9%, based on the study, appeared to be children who had participated in bullying. And we know that that's likely. If you've been bullied, that you may react by bullying. But that number seems actually very low to me, in light of some of the things that have been talking about in the media. Only 9% of these 1,200 kids had actually bullied. That
does seem low to me as well. All right, now you and Dr. Granpeesheh spoke a little bit in the Ask Dr. Doreen segment about this next story that came out of the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry about children likely to recover from autism.
Yes.
And what I'd like to hear.
Brand new study. It's coming out in the February edition, so it's just been published online today, but already the media is weighing in. And one of the things that we talked about was that the Daily Mail, the headline yesterday was, "Children can grow out of autism." Now, what upsets me about that is that if you look at the study, and nowhere in the abstract or in the study does it talk about growing out of autism.
Right, just growing out with no interventions.
Right. Right. They talk
we got to
about
be clear that when they're saying that kids can grow out of autism, they're not looking at what
That's the media spin on it.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with what the study says.
Okay.
The study was looking to see, because there seems to be this phenomena, right? That there are some kids who start out and get tested and qualify for an autism diagnosis.
At the age of 2 or say or 3,
right?
they have an autism diagnosis, and then at 7, 8, 9, whatever, they may be tested again,
to a psychologist.
and they don't have it.
They don't qualify for it, right? And what, is this in fact something that's happening? And what are some markers that would show when children are more likely to reach that? Can we look and get any inferences from this? And what the study found was that in fact there are children who got a diagnosis that appears to be correct and no longer qualify for it somewhere down the line. And what they've initially identified is that for those kids, it seems like the kids who've gotten the optimal outcome, while not in the majority, but there are many of them, it seems that they had less of a social disability early on. They had more social strengths, but that they tended to have higher repetitive behaviors and higher and more severe along the language barriers.
Okay.
But that their social components seem to be stronger. Now, they're continuing to look at it and look at what types of intervention that they had and duration of them.
So there's nothing in the study that indicates these children that, quote, recovered, what level of treatment and interventions they were receiving.
Well, that's the next phase of it. But the quote that came out from the actual people who did the study said, okay, so this is Dr. Thomas Insel, who's the director of the U.S. National Institute of Mental Health, said, although the diagnosis of autism is not usually lost over time because it's less than 50%, but it's close to 50%, the findings suggest that there is a very wide range of possible outcomes. For an individual child, the outcome may be knowable only with time and after some years of intervention.
Okay.
So that's not growing out of, folks.
No, that's not growing out of.
That is not growing out of.
For example, as we call it, recovered.
Yes.
And I would say for most of us, a true statement would be that it is certainly no surprise to us that children recover from autism. But those children that recover generally have intensive early intervention.
Absolutely.
This is not something that just leaving a child to function in a typical world with absolutely no support, no ABA therapy, no, other types of interventions, that child will just automatically make that leap, that transition.
There is no autism fairy who comes in and bonks them in the night and says, by the way, you don't have this anymore, you grew out of it. And the study is not in any way suggesting that children outgrow it. They are suggesting that there are children who get to the point where they no longer qualify for it. It's just the media and the rest of the article talks about the fact that intervention is necessary, but the headline, you know how they like to grab our attention.
They like to grab our attention, and it's got to be catchy with, children can grow out of autism. And it doesn't say with 40 hours a week of ABA therapy, a one-on-one aid, it started at 2, and often, maybe biomedical interventions, many other supports.
And a lot of heartache, tears, and hard work.
Yes.
Thank you very much. But we are going to be talking more about the actual study with Dr. Jonathan Tarbox on Friday in the 11 o'clock hour. So for those of you who want to hear more about the study and the ins and outs, and we're going to be talking about that with Dr. Tarbox.
I'd like to hear what Dr. Jonathan has to say on it.
Yeah, it should be fascinating.
Okay.
And so a lot of stuff in the news.
A lot in the news.
But we have a very special guest today.
We do. We have Heyman Hakimi, who is an advocate, a legal advocate.
Yeah.
And he has worked with ACT Today.
Yes.
He is actually the legal advocate who is working with the Bayanoza family from Uganda. Our grant, along with the Prince of Peace Episcopal Church, funded a grant for, made a donation to ACT Today to fund a grant for Crescent, the little boy from Uganda, who was being treated just in a absolutely atrocious manner in Uganda because of the lack of education and understanding.
Yes.
And he's also advocating for their young daughter, Melissa, who was already in the system here in LA. So we're going to talk to Heyman about just in general things you might want to know from a legal advocate, but also I think in particularly families that are underserved.
Yes.
This seems to be, you know, an area of specialty for him. And we want to shed light on how families that are underserved, minority families, families that don't have financial means can become more empowered in the public schools and help their children get the free and appropriate public education that they deserve. So Heyman will be here to speak with us about that after we take a break.
All right, we'll be back with him after
Heyman
these messages.
Hakimi, thank you.
When you find out you're having a boy, you always think like, oh, he's going to play football, he's going to do this and that. And then when he's diagnosed, all those things get washed away.
It's like that piece that's always in the back of your mind, you know, where is he, what is he doing, is he safe?
We really didn't know what we were dealing with. I wish that they could have directed me a little bit more and provided me some information.
I was a young mom. I didn't know what it was like to raise a boy, despite a boy with autism.
Hundreds of thousands of families are not getting the help they need for their children with autism all around the country. ACT Today is determined to bridge the gap. These families really have to go through a lot to get a grant. The application process isn't easy. The records, the diagnosis proof, they're really battling for their kids. So when we can give them a grant, it is so wonderful to see that they succeed in getting that help for their children. Our founder, Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, is an amazing woman, and she is one of the world's foremost authority on behavior of children with autism. She's extremely knowledgeable, and she oversees every single grant we give. She is part of that process. People may think of autism care and treatment as simply schooling or therapy, but you know, we provide important safety supports, things like fencing, for example. The whole family's living in fear of that child running out into traffic. I recently delivered an iPad to a little boy with some of the apps that are out there for children with autism. Miracles happen.
I got the iPad from ACT.
From ACT,
What did it say? Can you repeat that, Dustin?
I got the iPad from ACT.
We have helped so many military families, and when I think of these brave families that are fighting two battles, one to protect our country and one for the right treatment and care for their children, it breaks my heart, and I think we have to do more as a nation to help them.
There's not a day that doesn't go by that we don't think about it. Some people say, oh, he's normal. You don't see the battles that I see every single day. My husband does have to deploy, and when they get on that bus, that might be the last time that my kids ever see them.
So I called, and they informed me that he had received the grant, which was like a blessing from above. I was just like speechless. I just started to cry because, you know, without it, we would have been lost.
The ACT grant was a total miracle. Without that, we wouldn't be able to receive the service dog. So we're so appreciative what they've done for us as a family.
Recently, ACT Today funded a program for military children with autism in San Diego, the Inclusion Films program, which is run by Joey Travolta and teaches kids on the autism spectrum literal filmmaking skills. They learn how to make a movie.
Are we ready? There you go, got it. Okay. Everything that goes into the process of making a film goes into everyday life. So they're learning life skills, they're learning to collaborate.
It was really nice to know how much they were enjoying this camp, and they're with people who are supporting them and are making them feel great about themselves and their differences and their similarities. And I get two kids that are working together and apart and together and apart, so it's an interrelationship as well as a camp and a learning experience.
It's so fulfilling when I get letters. One stands out for me, a boy who was 14 with Asperger's, and we gave him a grant to go to a drama camp. He wrote to us and said, "Dear ACT Today, thank you for letting me belong for the first time in my life." These kids are remarkable. You know, we underestimate them. They're so knowledgeable, they're so capable, and we can change the life of a family, which means changing the life of a community. Hi, welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. And Shannon and I are joined by Heyman Hakimi, who is a legal advocate. And Heyman, you're here to let us know some of the things that families should be aware of when they are working with not only the school district, but the regional center, if they are served by the regional center. Now, first of all, you have secured, you've worked with hundreds of families across Southern California. You've been very successful in getting one-on-one aids provided for children, non-public school placements, and various other supports. Can you tell us what are the most vital points that a parent needs to know about getting services from first of all, the school?
Well, first of all, I think the most important thing to understand is that the regional center and the local school district have two separate responsibilities.
Okay.
And the reason I'm saying that is because a lot of times you'll get the blame game, you'll get the pointing from each side. You'll go to the regional center, you'll say, hey, my child has self-help needs, my child has certain behaviors, maybe sensory stimulation needs, my child needs some social skills training. Your regional center coordinator will say, point you that way, send you back to your school district.
Okay.
You say, okay, I've taken that avenue, so let me go to my school district. You'll set an IEP meeting up, and the administrator of the school district will point you right back to the regional center and say that's something that's not education related.
Educationally related, okay.
So the important part for all parents to understand is that a school district's responsibility is everything that has to do with anything for a child that's education related. So that can be a fine line, and that's why parents need to be very strategic on these services, because in my opinion, ABA can address self-help needs, it can address language, it can address behaviors, obviously, and it can address social skills. But if there's something happening in the home setting, let's say using a toothbrush correctly, brushing your teeth in the appropriate manner, putting the toothpaste on your toothbrush. School district is going to say that's not our responsibility. That has nothing to do with his access to the curriculum in the school. But the important part is, and I think the best thing parents need to do, is they need to take it one step at a time. Your child is in school for most of the day. So the thing to do and the best approach would be that parents need to go to the school district first, be able to get all the services they can that are educational related that affect their child in the classroom setting. So if your child has issues holding a pencil, that's educationally related in a classroom setting. If your child has some impulsivity and cannot sit in a chair for a long period of time, that's education related. Now, once you do that through the form of an IEP meeting, you can go back to the regional center with your IEP document standing and say, hey, listen, regional center, I did everything you told me to. I've gotten all the education-related services from the school district. Now it's your responsibility to give me what I need in the home. When you have those services in the school district, that's a profile of what your child's needs are. So when you get back to the regional center, you're going to tell the regional center, I'm getting 15, 20 hours of ABA at school because my child has these needs. These are the goals we're working on. So with autism, as everyone knows, consistency is key. So if you're getting these things during the day at school, your argument as a parent is going to be when he comes home, he continues to need that these goals need to be worked on. Regardless if it's in the educational setting or not, they can be tailored for it to be implemented in a home setting. So for example, they don't necessarily have to be working on writing goals to write letters, but they can use some fine motor grasping. They can do a lot of activities that can be done in a home setting that aren't per se educational related, but are also linked right back to what they would be doing in the classroom.
That's great advice.
It's very good advice.
Let's talk a little bit about the IEP process, though, when you're going through this with the school, because for a lot of people, it's very intimidating. My first IEP, and I had been a teacher and been on the other side, but my first time as a parent, I was overwhelmed. And there's some ins and outs of it that, you know, people aren't prepared for. Talk to us a little bit about what happens at the IEP, who's there, who should be there, and what our rights are at the IEP meeting.
Well, here's the thing. In my opinion, an IEP is a resource for a parent, and it's a tool. However, there comes a certain point where you've been to 15 IEPs in one school year, you've taken time off of work, you've taken time away from your other children or other responsibilities you may have to sit in front of these people and constantly beg and plead and tell them these are my child's needs. Now, as a parent, you're your child's voice, and that's very important. However, there's a difference between having a 1-hour IEP and having 10 of those, and having a sufficient IEP that's 4 hours that you can really get into the brunt of your concerns and also go over your goals and objectives. So the important part about the IEP, first and foremost, is that a parent can call an IEP whenever they want. So whenever they do that, the district has a 30-day timeline to be able to set that IEP up. Sometimes, obviously, it might take a little longer if it's the beginning of school, Christmas holidays. A lot of school districts want to jam these meetings in together. But a parent can, if they have a concern about one behavior that's occurring, they can call an IEP at any time.
Let's just walk through that scenario for a minute. Let's say we have a situation where a child is exhibiting a behavior at home that's new, that's disturbing, that the parent knows is happening at school and is being carried home to the home environment. So they go, they call an IEP, and they say, I've noticed this behavior is a new behavior, new problem, where my child is jumping up on a desk and screaming. And in this case, what the child is saying, they're acting like another child that happens to be in that child's placement. Given that scenario, what would you advise a parent to do?
Well, that's why the IEP meeting is so important, because if that's happening, obviously it's a behavior that's occurred from something, whether it's the environment or whether it's the lack of training of the aides in the classroom setting, that we don't know. But those things are obviously tangibles that occur in the classroom every day. What needs to happen is during that IEP, the most important part of your IEP document is your IEP notes page. It's in the back of your IEP after your goals and objectives. That's really your forum to be able to object, to specify your concerns, identify what exactly is it that you're concerned about, and what would be the ramifications of that continuing. If that's not in that page, and the problem is that you're going to have a school psychologist taking notes, and that school psychologist is going to be behind a laptop taking notes off of what you're saying. So a lot of times I read those notes pages and say, I was sitting in this meeting the whole time. That's not what was said. A lot of things are omitted because they're damaging to a school district. So as a parent, the best thing to do is be very articulate during these IEP meetings. Make sure you go in there prepared, read your goals and objectives. If you have concerns, make sure, I always tell our clients or parents that talk to me, make a bullet point of your concerns, so when you're talking, you can get straight to the point. And there's no deflections from, what about the medications? What is he sleeping? Is anything different in the household? Because with all due respect, there's always seems to be an excuse about, it's not the setting, but more so something else that's affecting the child. So because that IEP page is derived from a school district, you need to make sure you take advantage of that IEP notes page.
And we do get the opportunity in the meeting, they'll read them to us, and we get the opportunity to say, I object to this, change this to that, and can interact with them about that. And I think that's an important thing. I never really thought about it before. I'm always fussy about that, but other people get an opportunity to read it. We want to make sure that it's accurate. But going back to Nancy's example, so you request the IEP meeting, and then who should be at that IEP meeting, and what should we expect from them to do at that point if this new behavior has cropped up?
Speaking specifically to Nancy's example, if there's behaviors going on, the first thing a parent needs to ask is, let me see the data.
Okay.
Because that's what's driving whatever is behind this behavior, and that's how you identify. I've had a lot of situations where the behavior only occurs certain times during the morning, or certain times during the afternoon. There has to be antecedent to these things. There has to be something that's leading to these behaviors. These behaviors don't just occur. So the most important thing, and the thing that a parent would strategically be able to get out of a district, a lot of times these districts are so busy, so bogged down. These teachers, God bless them, they don't have enough resources in these classrooms. The aides aren't trained. With all due respect, the aides chewing bubble gum, they're texting in the corner. So that data is not being taken.
Right.
But as a parent, if you demand that data, you give them a window, 10 days, give me the data, I need to review it, and we need to have a follow-up meeting. Because in my opinion, to answer your question, this specific example that Nancy gave is worthless to have an IEP for, because all you're doing is you're throwing them at a wall as a parent, and you're saying, this is what's occurring in the classroom, help me, help me. But then they're going to say, well, we don't see it, or it's not occurring as consistently as you think. So that's why we go back to the data.
So you request the data?
Yes. You always request the data. You want to see who's working with your child in the classroom.
See if there is data.
Who's taking it, how they're taking it. And a smart way to approach it is because I want to make sure there's consistency between the home and school.
Yeah. Okay.
So I need to see what the data is.
So what if the school district says we cannot give your child a one-on-one aid, and you disagree with that? What if the district, after the IEP, you request a one-on-one aid, and they say, we cannot accommodate that. Your child can be placed in general ed with a one-on-one aid for 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day, and the other part of the day they'll have to be in the resource class or whatever they designate their special day class?
Well, that's a good question. I think the important part to understand globally is that free and appropriate public education is a very vague term. What does that mean? What does it look like? So when you're looking at specific, unique child's needs, every child is different. When you're requesting a one-to-one aid, there has to be a reason a parent's requesting that. Obviously, a lot of times it's the child might be impulsive, they not be able to access the curriculum. It's very, very difficult to procure a one-to-one aid from a school district by just asking for one.
Okay.
So as a parent, you have a lot of rights in terms of assessments and the ability to ask the district to fund outside evaluations. So you can get someone, an outside party, that doesn't have any responsibility to a school district or yourself. They're an independent person that's coming in, they're evaluating your child for what their specific needs are.
Okay.
And we have a right to that?
Yes. The way it works is legally, a school district has a triennial every 3 years, as every parent knows. A parent can disagree with the results of a district assessment as soon as that IEP occurs. So what's going to happen is they're going to do their testing, their assessments. Usually you get a full round, a psychoeducational, a behavior assessment, speech and language, OT. Once those results come out, you have an IEP meeting to discuss them. At that point, a parent can have a disagreement, like in terms of they may believe that one-to-one aid is necessary. That recommendation is not in those assessments. At that point, a parent can request the district to fund in full what's called an independent educational evaluation. Acronym is IEE. That means that the district has two choices at that point when that request is made. They can't ignore it, they can't just say no. Either they need to fund the assessment by the assessor of the parent's choosing, or they would have to file a legal complaint to defend the appropriateness of their assessments. In my experience in 7 years, the latter occurs very, very seldomly. That they file.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Because
I'm the
cost
exception.
of doing that.
You're the exception.
They've done it to me twice.
They filed against you twice.
And let me tell you.
But I'm the exception.
A lot of times when they do that is because they are looking to get to an endpoint faster than them having to spend the money to get all those assessments, and then you asking for the same thing that's going to come out of them. So don't let that intimidate you. All parents, sometimes it happens. I've had parents where they're like, oh, that means my case is over now. What's my child going to do? And I'm saying, no, you have to fight. As a parent, the ones that, there's about a 10% population of parents that fight and that don't go away and that make their voice known, but they do it in a manner where they're organized in the IEP and it's just not them screaming and being upset. It's them coming in, whether they have representation or not, they're educated. And that's the most intimidating thing to a school district, is a parent that's educated, that knows what she wants and is not going to leave the room until he or she gets it. So those evaluations, I think, are really substantial. They're probably the most intricate part of anything that a parent can do. This is because this is a person that doesn't know your child, doesn't know you, doesn't know the school district. They're going in there objectively. They're doing a classroom observation. They're interviewing your teacher. They're looking at the aides, their posture, their training, what they're doing in terms of interventions. And then they're coming out with the report that has recommendations in it. So once those recommendations are there, then you have a lot more wiggle room to say, well, these recommendations are so much different than what we talked about when the district's assessments were done. So
you recommend first and foremost to get that independent assessment done.
Yes.
And the district is required to pay for that unless they determine that they have a conflict with what this independent assessment says versus their assessment, and then it may go to
Right.
due process.
And I will say, ours didn't go to due process. We stopped before that and went to mediation, and we had great results. It ended up very good for me and for our child, and no complaints there. So I want to add to that, don't be afraid. Twice they filed against us, and twice I'm happy. So it's okay. I want to talk a little bit about the end of the IEP process, because I know that's a really intimidating time when they've said everything that they want to say, and we've had an opportunity to say something. That always seems to be a little rushed. And then everybody starts ruffling papers, and they have these documents for you to sign.
Right.
And there's that crazy little moment for parents where, they shove the paper and it's like, oh, we just need you to sign here, here, and here. Right. And we talk about rights a lot, but go over for us what we need to sign, what we don't need to sign, and what the repercussions of what we sign are.
Well, first thing is, the biggest piece of advice I could get any parent is never sign an IEP during an IEP.
But there is a part where we have to sign that we attended.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I always tell all of our clients that any parent that asks me, you can sign for participation because clearly you participated.
Right.
That's the only checkbox you need to check. What you need to do is you just got a ton of information from 5-6 different people in the room about your child. It might be conflicting, it might be accurate, you don't know. What you need to do is you need to take that document home. You need to study that document. You need to look at the goals and objectives. You need to talk to, if you have a husband, about it, if you have a regional center caseworker that you trust, if you have an ABA in-home provider, a psychologist, psychiatrist, anyone who is a part of your team that knows your child. You need to run this document by them and include them in the discussion about what's going on. A lot of times, parents agree to certain parts of the IEP and don't agree to others. The biggest myth is a district will tell you if you don't sign the IEP, you don't get anything. Right. Which is absolutely a farce. It's not accurate.
Okay.
A parent can consent and dissent to any part of the IEP they want. So, for example, Nancy goes to an IEP and they offer her a significant amount of speech for her child, and this parent is happy. Nancy's happy. So Nancy is not happy with the one-to-one aid situation that they did not provide. So Nancy can agree and consent to the speech and language, but she can also dissent to the fact that she still believes that there's a concern and there needs to be a one-to-one aid. You can always do that. You can do that on the notes page, but my advice would be always follow up in your own writing, put something in correspondence in a letter, say these are the things that we talked about, because a lot of times those notes pages, like I said, won't be accurate.
Right.
On top of that, you want to make sure that you have a standing position on what you're consenting to and what you're not, because you don't want services to occur that you didn't agree to, and you also don't want vice versa, services that you agreed to not be occurring on a daily basis. And as a parent, you can't be in the classroom every day.
Right.
So the most important part is I've had parents all the time is I have some things I like in my IEP that I would like to agree to, but the district is telling me it's all or nothing.
Right.
And that's not accurate.
Okay. We're getting close to being out of time, and there's so much more that we want to talk about, but I kind of want to make sure that people know if they want to get a hold of you, the law office that you work with. Tell us a little bit about how they can get a hold of you and what the name of the law office is.
Well, law office is Michelle Ortega. We're located in Long Beach, California, but we have cases from San Diego to San Francisco, so distance is not an issue. And our contact phone number is, I can give my direct cell phone number out to whoever. I like to make sure everyone's available.
Okay, yeah, Emily has that.
But I just want to make sure
TheLegalDuo.com.
TheLegalDuo.com. I want to make sure that parents understand that just because it's a law office, don't get intimidated and think, oh my God, I have to mortgage my home. We're very flexible with parents, and the reason we do this is because, we are dedicated to this community and we want to make sure that we change lives. So a lot of these attorneys, they're doing this because it's just a fad and autism rates are high and it's something, nice to do.
And a way to make money.
And a way to make money. But, we have, a lot of grants, like Act Today provided us a grant. We have another single mom grant that's available at our office. And when those aren't available, we try to work as flexible as possible with parents.
And so you work with a law office. When somebody comes, do you help them to determine whether they need your services or whether, because you're an advocate, or whether they need a lawyer, and what decides whether you need an advocate or a lawyer? Is there a difference?
Well, no, the way we work is myself and Ms. Ortega, we work in tandem. So usually one of us would work on the case as a lead. We'll kind of consult with each other. So, prototypically, we try to work on the cases together. But I always offer a free consultation to anyone, and including your listeners or whoever is watching, that our our consultation is free of charge. A lot of parents just come to get information. They bring their IEP, they bring their assessments and say, what's your opinion on this? What should I do? A lot of times, you know, myself or Michelle will say, well, you need to do these things first and then come back if it doesn't correct itself. Or you need to talk to this person, maybe you need to get an assessment from CARD or from another expert, and then come to the district and try to provide those results and see what happens, because litigation is not the answer. But you know, certain times you have to take the next step, and our approach to that is, you know, we're not adversarial. You know, we don't try to start problems, because at the end of the day, as a parent, you still have a relationship with your school district long after we're gone as an advocate or an attorney. So we want to make sure it's pleasant, and you don't have to have a big bark to be able to be successful here. You just have to have good evidence, and you do that by having good experts.
As you said, though, there's that percentage of parents that are persistent and those that aren't. In your opinion, are a lot of our families that are more economically disadvantaged and minority families, are they not taking advantage of their rights and not advocating as effectively as they could for their children?
Absolutely. I think that our caseload now, you're looking at about 75% of minority families are single moms. When you're looking at that, you have a lot of Asian families that culturally look at the IEP as the school district doing them a service, which it's not. They're taxpayers, they're residents of the community, and if they have a concern, they need to bring it up. You have a lot of Spanish-speaking parents that have a translator there that's from the school district that's not necessarily giving them the accurate information that's being put out there on the table. A lot of them don't get it in terms of, there's IEE rights. You can get an evaluation from an outside party. You can consent, dissent, all these things we've talked about, the parents' rights. A lot of these minorities families or families from another, you know, community that come here, they don't know that these rights are available to them. So a lot of times they're the ones that get the most taken advantage of. For example, you mentioned the Bainosa kids. You know, kids that are supposed to be with a plethora of services and interventions are being placed in a general education class with no support, no services. And, you know, this child has significant needs that need to be addressed, core language needs that need to be addressed before you can be in a general education setting. No aid, no services, but again, they look at the profile of family and say, okay, we can take advantage of that family. And, you know, with all due respect, you got an Orange County family that they know that they can't take advantage of, and those things are not occurring. So, you know, I don't think it's about socioeconomic status or how much income you have in terms of family. It's about your child has needs and you need to advocate for them. But until a closed mouth doesn't get fed, and until you understand your rights, you can't really be educated to go into an IEP and say, no, this is not correct. And unfortunately, the minority families are disserviced because they don't have the community leadership a lot of times to have these free seminars and have these items. So that's why, you know, I try to tell all of our parents, be as informed as possible. Talk to as many people as you can. There's a lot of different foundations that do a lot of free legal seminars, that do IEP workshops. You know, even come to our office. You know, I always tell them we have a Spanish-speaking assistant. We have
you'll do a first meeting.
You've got this great pamphlet here that has these 7 did you knows. Is this something that's available online, or can people write to you guys and get a copy?
That's on our website. Whoever would like a copy of it, also I can send you the full pamphlet.
Great.
And any information you need in terms of, I'm always willing to get advice out. If parents want to contact me, I can give them, you know, they have my cell phone number. It's available here. They can contact me, get free advice. That's not a problem, and I try to do whatever I can to help. These families.
You're a stand-up guy.
Thank you.
We want you to come back more. We have all these questions we didn't get to. So if you can come back.
I think particularly for, as you said, our families that are underserved, the more information we can give them in a free public forum so they're better educated, because it's intimidating for many of them to even be able to get appointments and pursue these things, you know, because they've got such busy lives. I mean, we have single moms out there struggling to simply put food on the table, pay the bills, and as you said, if they're going to 11 IEPs and they're not getting results, something is wrong here. So they need to take a look at how they can empower themselves better and their children. So hopefully we can be part of that process.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us, and I hope you'll come back again.
Yeah, we're looking forward to all the wonderful things that you're going to accomplish for Crescent and Melissa.
For those countless other families. We're going to take a short break and come back to close out the show. Stick with us. Welcome back. We're here at the end of the show, and you have some exciting information to tell us about an upcoming upcoming event?
We do. We have our second annual Stars and Strikes event, which is our partnership with the Eddie Guadardo Foundation. Eddie, a former Major League Baseball player. It's in Tustin. It's not this Sunday, but the following Sunday. What does that mean? The 20, I don't know. Anyway, last Sunday in January. And they can go to our website at Act Today to get information on attending.
And a star-studded event.
All kinds of Major League Baseball players. It was so much fun last year. We're going to have we have all the Olympic volleyball players there too.
How
in
exciting.
addition to Major League Baseball.
Fabulous. And we'll be back next week with another exciting show. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me.
And I'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye.